Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are cracking open a really fascinating document. It promises nothing less than a completely rewired life. And it says you can do this simply by changing the words and the mental filters you use to process reality. We're going deep into the core themes of the manuscript, Reframe Your Brain, the user interface for happiness and success.
And our mission today for you is to give you a really solid, high-level overview of this whole thing, almost like it's a strategic manual. We're going to be breaking down the central concepts of what's called cognitive reframing, which is it's essentially a strategic form of brain hacking. And we're going to extract the immediate, actionable insights across mental health, career strategy, social stuff, you name it. We want you to walk away with, well, practical software updates for your mind.
I love that framing. And the architect of this mental user interface, he's a bit of an unlikely figure. It's Scott Adams, who most people would know as the creator of the Dilbert comic strip.
Yeah, and that connection might sound a little strange at first, a cartoonist talking about brain hacking. But you have to remember, Adams is also the author of that perennial bestseller, How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. And crucially, he's a trained hypnotist. He has decades of experience studying persuasion, mass influence, all the practical science of hacking our default programming.
Right. So you get this incredible synergy. It's the keen, satirical observation of a master cartoonist mixed with the very practical, results-driven tools of a hypnotist.
It is. And the central premise he offers is, beautifully simple. He calls it a reframe. And a reframe is just this strategic act of changing how you think about the point of a given situation. You change the point, and that triggers a different mental state, which leads to different actions, and then you get different outcomes.
So just to be clear, we are definitely not talking about abstract philosophy here or, years of therapy.
No, not at all. This is about strategically identifying old, buggy, or just useless mental software, the default programming we all kind of inherit, and replacing it immediately.
Right.
With new high-performance programs that are actually designed for success and happiness.
So you're saying the process itself isn't dangerous. It's no more exotic than learning a new skill.
Exactly. Think about it. Everything you experience is already rewiring your brain. It's just happening randomly, based on what you see on the news or past trauma or whatever. The goal of this approach is to stop letting random negative inputs design your life. And instead, you intentionally do the rewiring yourself. You become the strategic author of your own neural circuits. Okay, so let's unpack that. The big question is, how do we actually do this reprogramming? The source material is very, very clear on this. It details 3 essential ingredients you need to physically change your brain structure and make these new reframes stick.
And this isn't just wishful thinking. It's based on known neuroplastic principles. I found this part so powerful because it just demystifies the whole brain hacking idea. It grounds it in something tangible. Real effort, real physiological change. So what are the components? What do you need to build that new circuit?
They're pretty straightforward, but they are demanding. So the first one is focus. You have to direct your mental energy fully 100% onto the new idea you're trying to install. Half-hearted attempts they won't cut it. They won't change the underlying structure.
Okay, so total focus. What's number 2?
Number 2 is repetition. You have to systematically pump that new stimulus into your brain over and over and over again. You do that until the idea moves from just being, a cool concept to a physical, permanent change in your neural structure.
Effort and mileage. Got it. But there's a third ingredient, and that's the one that seems to really supercharge the whole process.
Precisely. The third component, it's technically optional, but it acts as this massive acceleration mechanism. Emotion, whether it's fear or intense passion or happiness or love.
So any strong emotion.
Any strong emotion. Attaching that strong emotional charge to the reframe makes the rewiring happen so much faster.
Why is that? What's the mechanism?
Well, it's because the brain is just hardwired to prioritize emotionally charged events. It's a survival mechanism. It signals to your whole system, hey, this is important. Cement this information now.
That makes perfect sense. The emotional jolt is what really sets the memory and tells the brain to build that new pathway first. Now, to show just how fast a thought can override the body, even our reflexes, the author gives a few really surprising little anecdotes, starting with a common sneeze.
It's a wonderful, simple illustration. It's immediate mental power over physiology. So if you feel that classic tickle, the sneeze is building, you can actually deactivate the real involuntary sneeze. All you have to do is perform a fake sneeze. Or even more amazing, you can just imagine a fake sneeze.
That's it. Just imagining it.
That's it. The mental preparation of that fake act overrides the biological imperative of the real one. It's instantaneous.
That is just It's wild. The thought itself, the mental act, just halts a full-blown physical response. It's like finding out you have this tiny everyday superpower you never knew about.
And if that minor power doesn't fully convince you, consider the bigger evidence he presents. He talks about creating a video back in 2020. It was designed to reduce anxiety, and it only used a series of specific reframes and some light hypnosis techniques. The response was apparently astonishing. A massive number of people wrote in saying they had been cured or at least significantly relieved of these debilitating long-term anxiety issues.
Wow. Curing dozens, maybe hundreds of people with just words. Words strung together strategically to cancel that negative anxiety program that's running in their minds. That's a staggering demonstration. It suggests that anxiety isn't this permanent condition, but more like a default program that you can actually uninstall.
And this connects perfectly to one of the simplest and most actionable reframes in the whole document.
Yeah.
It's about turning boring, mindless waiting time into something productive. He calls it the breathing reframe.
Okay, so the default program here is you're waiting in line at the grocery store. Your mind says, this is a waste of time. I should check my phone. I should feel guilty that I'm not being productive. That's the usual frame, right?
That's the usual anxiety-inducing frame. The strategic reframe is brilliantly simple. I have time to breathe properly. And he specifically recommends integrating Dr. Andrew Huberman's method, the physiological sigh. It's 2 sharp inhales through the nose, followed by a long, slow exhale through the mouth.
Wait, I want to pause on that for a second, the mechanism there. Why 2 short inhales and then a long exhale? What's the science behind that beyond just, take a deep breath?
That's a great question. This is where the depth really is. The physiological sigh is specifically designed to rapidly activate your parasympathetic nervous system. That's your rest and digest system. See, when we get stressed, the tiny air sacs in our lungs, the alveoli, they start to collapse. That dual inhale, that sharp sniff, it forces those collapsed sacs to rapidly reinflate. Then the long exhale releases all the carbon dioxide, which is the chemical signal that tells your brain, okay, it's safe now, you can calm down. It is biologically the fastest way to drop cortisol and shift your state from stress to calm.
So the genius isn't just remembering to breathe, it's the pairing. You take a situation you hate waiting in line, which normally triggers anxiety, and you pair it with a habit that gives you an immediate, tangible, physiological reward. Calm energy.
Exactly. You're leveraging the situation you hate to install a new habit you love. You solve 2 problems at once. And because it feels so good so quickly, that rush of calm happens in under a minute, you actually start getting addicted to replacing boredom with proper breathing. You might even, counterintuitively, start looking forward to waiting in line, just so you can get that reliable boost. It's a perfect example of engineering a winning system.
Okay, so if we can strategically reprogram our own minds for internal control, the next logical step is applying that same strategic thinking to the outside world, specifically to your career and your definition of success. And this brings us to one of the most famous parts of the author's work, which is covered extensively in the source material. The 2 world-changing reframes he introduced and how to fail at almost everything and still win big.
Right. And these 2 reframes, they fundamentally shift your mindset.
Yeah.
They move you away from those traditional, rigid, and frankly, often demotivating ways of planning your life. It moves you towards models that are based on flexibility, continuous improvement, and momentum. The first one, and maybe the most powerful, is systems over goals.
And the traditional frame is it's immutable. It's been drilled into us for decades by every management guru, every self-help book. Success requires setting clear, measurable, specific goals.
And the reframe is a pretty harsh rejection of that. It's just systems are better than goals.
Right.
Now, the source defines a system not as an outcome, but as something you do every day to create good options for yourself in the future. And let's look at the psychology here. The big problem with a long-term goal, let's say it's lose 20 pounds or become CEO, is that every single day you haven't met it, you feel like a failure.
Right. You're living in a constant state of not yet succeeded.
And that negative mental state, that daily self-criticism, is incredibly demoralizing. It leads to burnout. It's why people quit.
But a system is different. A system like, be active for 30 minutes every day and learn one new thing about healthy nutrition. With a system, you either win or lose today. You did your 30 minutes, you win.
That is the critical difference. The system provides this steady drip of dopamine, that reward chemical, every single day you execute it. You maintain a high level of motivation because you're constantly winning. A goal only lets you feel success once, way off at the finish line, which is delayed and unreliable. The system guarantees daily success, and that creates unstoppable momentum.
And the material really emphasizes that a good system should increase your options, not limit them.
Oh, absolutely. You see this so clearly with education. If you choose a super specific, narrow focus like you only master one very niche trade, you're limiting your flexibility. If the market changes, you're stuck. To make that a system, you have to be constantly seeking adjacent skills. So for that niche expert, their system should be getting better at the trade, yes, but also learning business skills or marketing or management. The system outcome is becoming more versatile, which increases your options and prepares you for a world you can't predict.
Okay, that makes sense. So what's the second big strategic concept for career success?
The second one is talent stacks. And again, we're traditionally told to just focus everything on being in the absolute top 1% of one specific valuable skill.
Which is incredibly hard to do.
Brutally difficult. It often requires genetics or just extreme sacrifice. So the reframe is far more accessible and, I would argue, far more powerful. It's acquire skills that work well together and make you rare and flexible at the same time. Look, being in the top 25% of 3 or 4 complementary skills is way easier than being in the top 1% of one. But that combination makes you almost unique in the job market and therefore invaluable.
You're not looking for vertical mastery. You're looking for horizontal synergy. You're compounding small advantages.
That's a perfect way to put it. The classic example given in the source is adding effective public speaking skills to any corporate job. It doesn't matter if you're an engineer, a sales associate, an accountant, you add that one skill and you immediately become the obvious choice for promotion to manager. Why? Because most people are terrified of public speaking. You clear the path for yourself.
And if you expand that stack, let's say on top of your main skill, you add public speaking, clear business writing, and maybe a basic understanding of contract negotiation.
Then you become nearly unstoppable. You're flexible, you can communicate up, down, and out, you can secure agreements, and you have your core competency. If one of those skills becomes obsolete, the other 3 are still massive assets you can pivot with. It maximizes your flexibility for a future you can't predict.
So beyond these big frameworks, the material offers some key reframes for your daily career mindset. The first is about energy. Instead of obsessing over time, the reframe is manage your energy, not your time.
Yeah, and this just recognizes a simple biological truth, especially for anyone doing creative or knowledge work. You can produce exponentially more high-quality work in 15 minutes of high-focused energy than you can in 4 miserable, drained hours. High energy isn't just helpful, it's critical to the quality of the outcome. So when you're making any life decision, what car to buy, what project to take on, you should consciously ask, which path energizes me more? You should treat your energy as one of your most valuable assets.
Okay, now here's a reframe that. It sounds incredibly cynical at first, maybe even a little sociopathic. The usual frame is that your job is what your boss tells you it is. You're there to be loyal and perform. The radical reframe is your job is to get a better job.
It's a tough one to swallow, but the author justifies it as a pragmatic self-preservation system. This mindset drives you to continuous improvement. It puts you in a permanent job search mode. Not that you're always applying, but you're always observing the market, always upskilling. It reminds you to act in your own long-term self-interest because you have to recognize that your employer would and should drop you in a second if the business required it.
But doesn't that breed disloyalty? Why would a company invest in someone whose main job is to leave?
Well, it's not about being disloyal in a malicious way. It's about acknowledging the reality of modern employment. And ironically, a system that optimizes for your own improvement actually benefits your current employer in the short term because you're constantly learning and bringing new value. But where it really guides you is in strategic decision-making. When you have a choice of projects, this reframe tells you to prioritize the one that teaches you the most valuable, transferable skill, or the one that lets you network with key players. Even if that project isn't the most profitable for the company today, it's a strategic long-term investment in your own future viability.
This strategic thinking leads right into another really counterintuitive idea, the asset of embarrassment. The author suggests that boredom is actually nature's way of telling you that you need to increase your risk of embarrassment.
Yes, that uncomfortable feeling of I'm bored with life should be immediately reframed as I'm not embarrassing myself enough.
Yeah.
The reframe here is that embarrassment is a necessary and highly profitable investment.
An investment? How is inviting humiliation an investment? That sounds terrible.
Because it forces personal growth and it creates asymmetric opportunities.
Yeah.
Things with huge potential upside and very little downside. Think about it. Intentional embarrassment asking for an aggressive raise, pitching a wild business idea, asking out someone you think is above your league, trying a new skill you know you'll be terrible at in front of people. These actions toughen you up. They give you great stories. And most importantly, they create opportunities that absolutely could not have happened otherwise. Most people avoid these things, so their life follows a very safe, low-reward path.
You're essentially training your brain to take a hit to the ego and get back up. So you react to rejection by thinking, okay, that was a learning investment, instead of, oh no, I have to retreat and never try that again.
And this connects to a massive mental health benefit, preventing cognitive dissonance. The source argues that the fear of embarrassment is the main psychological engine that drives people to refuse to admit they're wrong. When you're faced with evidence that contradicts your belief, your brain would rather protect your fragile ego than accept the data.
And that's cognitive dissonance, right? Where the brain actively hallucinates reasons to keep you feeling right no matter what the facts are. How does that work when our identity is tied up in it?
Well, when you tie your personal identity, your sense of self-worth, to a team, and that can be a political party, a company, a sports team, anything, the brain treats an attack on that team's viewpoint as a physical threat to you. And to survive that threat, it triggers a self-defense mechanism. It starts filtering out or even fabricating information to maintain internal consistency. It will literally rationalize absurdity to avoid the minor embarrassment of just saying, you know what, I was wrong.
So by strategically detaching your self-worth from any team, you disarm that defense mechanism.
Exactly. It prevents your brain from triggering the dissonance. It allows you to absorb new, conflicting information more accurately and quickly. If you're never afraid to be embarrassed, you can just say you were wrong and move on. You don't need your brain to invent a whole false reality just to protect an ego that was never really under threat in the first place. Okay, let's transition now. Let's take these insights about internal control and apply them to how we navigate our daily social lives, our interpersonal effectiveness. And we have to start with a foundational reframe about confidence, because that's really the key to unlocking better social flow.
Right. Most people see confidence as this innate thing. You know, you either won the genetic lottery and you have it, or you don't. Or it's something you only get after some huge public success.
But the reframe is that confidence is a skill you learn and manage. And this is so critical. If you accept it as a skill, you immediately gain control over it. It can be built up piece by piece through tangible actions. Things like consistent fitness, getting your sleep right, practicing those breathing exercises we talked about, or even taking a course like Dale Carnegie. The point is, confidence is a dial you can turn, not a fixed setting.
And that reframing immediately helps with something like social anxiety. When you walk into a crowded room, the default mental frame is, okay, everyone here is a potential source of scrutiny and embarrassment for me.
That's the egocentric, self-defeating frame. The revolutionary reframe is to focus outward. It is, each person here has a problem, social awkwardness, that I can solve for them right now. And that shift is profound. By going into the situation as the problem solver, you immediately disarm your own anxiety. Your focus is no longer on your performance, it's on their comfort.
Because most people are uncomfortable meeting strangers. They're all just standing there silently praying someone else will start the conversation. You realize you're not the exception, you can be the solution.
And the strategy is so simple. You just ask easy, low-effort questions. What brings you here tonight? Or where are you based? These are simple for the other person to answer, and it immediately solves their problem, which is, what do I do with my hands and what should I say right now? You make their part easy, and they feel instant relief, which makes them like you. It's a selfless social hack.
Okay, so moving to the other end of the social spectrum, the source offers very clear guidance on identifying and dealing with toxic people. It advises reframing someone with a strong personality or who is difficult as just toxic.
It's a necessary simplification.
Yeah.
The key insight is that toxic people operate on a fundamentally different reward system. It's often negative. They might be biologically or psychologically rewarded by watching others fail or by creating conflict and chaos. They are not motivated by reciprocity or mutual gain.
And the hard truth presented here is that they can't change that core reward system.
Precisely. Because their reward system is, for all intents and purposes, baked in. You can't manage them, you can't fix them, you can't talk them out of their behavior, and therefore, the only known, reliable way to deal with them is removal. The source is absolute on this. Get them out of your life and block them where you need to. The author says no one who has taken this step has ever regretted it. It's about protecting your energy and your systems.
Now, what about less extreme but still frustrating interactions, like dealing with customer complaints or just general criticism? The material brings up a fantastic anecdote about the boss at the Sugar Maples Resort.
Oh, it's a masterclass in separating the real problem from the emotional demand. The boss understood that many guests, especially those on vacation, they simply enjoy the act of complaining. They want to feel like a priority.
So if the actual problem is minor, say a flickering light bulb, what's the real issue you need to solve?
The real issue is the guest's emotional need to be heard and validated. The boss's genius system was to meticulously write down the issue on an official-looking work order and take it back to the office. It didn't even matter if he was going to fix it right away. The act of writing it down satisfied the emotional need for validation. The guest felt important and taken seriously, which was often far more important than the actual light bulb. It reframes the job from fixing things to managing perceptions.
That's such a powerful tool. So what about responding to just outright personal insults, especially online where it's almost impossible not to take them personally?
The reframe here is to view an insult as a confession. The insult is confessing one of two things. Either your accuser simply can't refute your opinion with logic, so they resort to attacking you, or they're struggling with significant personal problems that they're projecting onto you. Either way, it tells you everything about them and nothing about you.
And the suggested tactic for responding is fantastic. You just say, I appreciate your confession, and then walk away.
It's a radical power move. It completely disrupts the expected pattern. They expect you to argue, or block them, or insult them back. Instead, you leave them completely puzzled over what they just confessed. It instantly changes the power dynamic. You're in control, just calmly observing their internal confusion.
Finally, let's talk about the social assets you create by proactively giving compliments and doing favors. The reframe is that compliments are low-risk assets. They're like free money. They create goodwill that improves your odds in life without costing you anything.
The key is sincerity and quantity. Giving unsolicited, specific compliments is the easiest way to generate an asset. And to avoid making the other person feel awkward or deny it, the author suggests what he calls the drop-and-leave method.
Okay, tell us how that works, because most people are really bad at receiving compliments.
So you deliver a thick, sincere compliment. That presentation was the clearest analysis I've seen this quarter. Truly exceptional. And you immediately change the subject before they have time to get awkward or deflect. You drop the asset and you leave the scene. The compliment lands perfectly, and that positive feeling stays with them.
And this act of giving, it triggers the reciprocity principle, which is just fundamental to how humans operate socially.
Oh, absolutely. We are wired to reciprocate favors. So when you do favors for people, especially people with resources, people who hire, people who are well-connected, you're creating a high-interest social asset. And even if only half of those people ever return the favor, the long-term compounding interest of that goodwill is just the best strategy for success and a happy life.
All right, moving into section 4, now we're tackling the fundamentals, how we perceive reality, time, disagreement itself. This is where the rewiring gets profoundly philosophical, and it starts with a really radical reframe of our own past.
The usual frame, the default, is that our history is this fixed, solid thing. It dictates our present problems, that the trauma or failures of the past are a heavy anchor we have to drag around today. The source material just completely challenges this. It declares history is imaginary.
Whoa, that is a staggering claim. Most people would argue their past experiences are the most real things in their life. What does he mean by that practically?
He means that history does not exist in any material form right now. You can't touch it. You can't taste it. The past only exists today as a dangling artifact of chemical and electrical reactions in your brain. In other words, memories, which we know are notoriously unreliable, they're biased, and they're constantly being rewritten every time we access them.
So it's a story we tell ourselves. It's not a solid object.
Exactly. And once you truly untether your current problems from past trauma by realizing that those memories are 100% imaginary today, you gain immediate freedom. The past was real when it happened, sure, but the emotional charge we carry for it now, that's a choice. You can consciously choose to downgrade that historical narrative so that it functionally rounds to zero in its emotional power over you today.
And our immediate internal states, like anger and anxiety, they also get reframed in relation to time.
Yes. Anger is reframed as living in the past. You're just replaying events you cannot change, constantly feeling resentment for things that are already done. And anxiety is living in the future. You're rehearsing and anticipating bad, often imaginary outcomes. Neither of those states is happening in the present moment, which logically is the only moment you actually have any control over.
And this grounding in the present can also help with immediate physical discomfort. There's a reframe for pain, physical or emotional, that is surprisingly effective. Instead of thinking, I'm in pain, this is awful, you tell yourself, I am in pain for a minute.
This simple phrase just shifts your mind to an imagined future, even if it's only 60 seconds away, where the pain is gone. It psychologically converts what feels like indefinite suffering into a quantifiable, temporary challenge. The mind can endure temporary pain far, far better than it can indefinite suffering. It weakens the power of the discomfort instantly.
Now, when we interact with people, we often make huge mistakes based on assumptions. The author calls out the danger of thinking you can mind read. He says mind reading isn't real. We're just terrible at figuring out other people's motives.
And yet we do it constantly. We assume we know why a colleague made a rude remark or why a friend didn't call back, and that leads to false accusations, massive frustration, and conflict. The reality is we just project our own motives onto others, so the source advises that when you're faced with criticism, you should just call it out. You're assuming my motive, but neither of us can read minds, so let's stick to the facts of what actually happened.
And this inability to read minds leads directly to one of the most powerful reality reframes in the whole document. When you're in a fundamental disagreement, you have to drop the default frame of one of us is right and one of us is wrong.
And instead, you accept this beautiful reframe. We're watching two different movies on one screen. This is absolutely essential for navigating modern life, especially with all the intense political and emotional disagreements out there.
It's the ultimate statement of neutrality. It acknowledges that two people can see the exact same facts, the same news story, the same data, but because they have drastically different biases, experiences, and internal software, they are experiencing two completely different subjective realities.
And it is so freeing as a perspective. Once you accept this, you are released from that enormous, debilitating pressure to fix the other person. Their movie makes perfect logical sense to them, just as yours does to you. When our realities don't match, our brain just explains it away by saying the other person must have a faulty memory or bad intentions, which just makes the conflict worse. By accepting the two movies, you eliminate the conflict driver.
Okay, so if reality itself is subjective, built on the filters we choose, how do we strategically interact with it? The author calls it the user interface for reality. We need to know the persuasion buttons.
This is really the synthesis section. It outlines these primal psychological buttons you can press, and the number one most powerful button is freedom. Humans value freedom above almost everything else, even above pleasure in escaping immediate pain.
How does that actually translate into practical decisions?
Well, if you want to hire and keep the best people or have a long, happy marriage, you have to maximize the perception of freedom for the other person. A job that offers a bit less money but far more flexibility and autonomy will beat a high-paying, micromanaged job every time for the right kind of talent. Similarly, focusing on giving your spouse space and freedom is often way more critical than giving gifts or even minimizing conflict.
Next up, there's the incredibly surprising power of what he calls the fake because reasons.
This comes from some deep psychological research. Humans need reasons for things, but they don't necessarily need good reasons. In most low-stakes social situations, a weak or even nonsensical reason is often enough to get people to comply. This is because the other person's brain just wants a quick, logical-sounding resolution to the awkwardness of being asked for something.
Like the classic experiment, can I go ahead of you in line because I need to make copies? Even though everyone in line needs to make copies, that word because is the key.
Exactly. The brain hears the word because, it recognizes the structure of a reason, and it often just switches off critical analysis. I'll pay for lunch because I drove here today is enough to win the fight over the check 90% of the time, even though driving has nothing to do with who should pay.
And finally, two powerful attention grabbers that affect how information lands: simplicity and novelty.
Our brains are fundamentally lazy. They conserve resources. They hate complexity. This is why if you want to influence people, you need simple arguments, short sentences, and crystal clear asks. And conversely, novelty, just being slightly different or weird or unexpected, it grabs immediate attention. It overrides the brain's default filtering system. Pattern violation is the core of effective humor and memorable communication. We can turn now to personal well-being, starting with health, diet, and exercise reframes. And a lot of people find these simple reframes surprisingly effective because they apply that persuasive language directly to self-control.
The first one fundamentally changes how you think about eating. The usual passive frame is just, when I'm hungry, I eat food.
The effective reframe is to categorize. Some food is fuel, some food is entertainment. This is a powerful disruption of your automatic eating habits. Candy or chips aren't just food, they are explicitly labeled entertainment, which forces you to make a conscious choice. Do I need fuel right now, or am I just looking for some low-quality entertainment that I could probably find a better substitute for?
And the material makes a really radical claim about willpower itself. It suggests that knowledge about food is a direct substitute for willpower, which the author kind of considers imaginary, or at least very unreliable.
Right. Willpower is usually treated as this finite resource that just drains throughout the day. That's why we make bad choices late at night. Knowledge, however, is a permanent asset. Knowing the specific high-stakes consequences of sugar consumption, reframing sugar in your mind as poison or future inflammation, that's a much stronger defense than relying on willpower, which is always just one stressful event away from collapsing.
The key to exercise motivation also follows that systems model. The usual frame is, exercise is hard, it's something I have to endure.
And the reframe is, exercising is easier than not exercising if you turn it into a consistent habit. The most profound insight here is that the best exercises are simply the ones you are willing to do, not necessarily the theoretically best or hardest ones you read about in some magazine. If you punish yourself, forcing yourself onto a machine you hate, you are guaranteeing that the habit will not last. You have to find a system that rewards you enough for it to become addictive. Consistency always beats intensity in the long run.
And this all loops back to the author's personal, very simplified formula for happiness. It's linked to our fundamental biological imperatives, specifically the mating instinct. It's exercise, sex, and work, or productive effort.
It's a harsh but effective metric. The idea is, if you get 2 out of those 3 things done in a day, you have a good day. Your internal systems are rewarding you for biological success. If you only do 1, even if that one is the most fun, like leisure time, you often still feel hollow or unfulfilled. It suggests happiness isn't this nebulous state, but a tangible reward for acting in ways that are compatible with our primal drives, being physically viable, connecting socially and successfully, hunting and gathering.
Which then justifies a larger reframe about your environment. The usual frame is that your mind is just your brain, your thoughts.
The reframe is much more expansive and crucial. My mind includes my brain, my body, and my physical environment. A change to one changes the others. This means that if your mind is chaotic, you don't have to start with years of mental work. You can start reprogramming it by changing your physical environment, cleaning your room, organizing your desk, choosing a visually appealing workspace. These are physical hacks that immediately reduce your cognitive load and change your mental state from chaos to order.
And finally, the source addresses the necessary operating system for a successful life. The reciprocity operating system.
Yeah, the source outlines 4 main life operating systems: selfishness, revenge, victim, and reciprocity. The first 3, selfishness, which is only caring about your short-term gain, revenge, focusing all your energy on settling scores, and victimhood, externalizing all responsibility, they are all fundamentally flawed. They guarantee long-term failure and isolation. Only reciprocity, the belief that you get what you give, on average, is sustainable for high-quality life.
But the reality is, people will take advantage of your generosity sometimes. How does that mindset survive?
It survives because it plays the long game. Yes, individual instances of exploitation will happen, but the long-term asset creation and goodwill you generate by giving more than you take, by constantly operating in a mode of generosity, that makes it the only winning strategy. It creates a compounding social interest that far outweighs the occasional loss. It's an investment in the reliability of the human system as a whole.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've taken a deep dive into this blueprint for becoming the strategic programmer of your own reality. The core theme really is this active shift from passively accepting the world's random wiring trauma, negative self-talk, rigid goals, to strategically choosing reframes that set you up for continuous winning. We're talking about moving from goals to systems, from managing time to managing your energy, and from being a target of social anxiety to being the problem solver in the room.
And the central psychological maneuver behind all of this is strategically detaching your ego. It's the cold recognition that we are fundamentally irrational creatures who just spend most of our time rationalizing choices we've already made.
Right.
I mean, once you accept that true human rationality is maybe 10% of what we do, not 90, you can use these tools like the fake or the to movies on one screen, Reframe, to navigate the world with so much less frustration and a much higher rate of influence.
And it all culminates in that really fascinating thought. The world you inhabit, your subjective reality, it's not necessarily the fixed, true one. It's the one that predicts the best outcome based on the mental filter you consciously choose to apply.
And that raises the most important question this deep dive presents. It's, do you continue to let your brain be randomly wired by accidental experience, by default negativity, by past trauma, or do you strategically author yourself? Do you choose reframes that optimize your filter for sustainable success and deep contentment? The choice is often not between what is true or false, but between a worldview that limits you and a worldview that predicts the best possible outcome for your future.
So we challenge you to identify just one of the powerful reframes we talked about today. Maybe it's embracing boredom as a reminder to go embarrass yourself, or simply telling yourself, I am in pain for a minute, or maybe just integrating the calming power of I have time to breathe properly. Focus on applying and repeating just one today. Start strategically authoring your future.
Because the most profound idea from all of this is that your trauma, your past, your negative emotions, they're not permanent fixtures. They are old software bugs. And you have the capacity to patch and update them. And your ability to do that is a strategic superpower just waiting to be unlocked.
Until next time.